I'm going to tell you about something that happened to me last summer, something that still sends shivers down my spine whenever I pass by those seemingly benign roadside motels. My name is Leon Hartman, and I was on what you could call an end-of-college road trip with my best friend, Jamie. We had just graduated, and the plan was to hit as many states as we could before reality, also known as our new jobs, started in the fall. It was one of those spontaneous, let's make memories kind of trips. We were in rural Pennsylvania, far from the hustle of Philly or the historical charm of Gettysburg. It was the kind of place where the towns were small enough that everyone probably knew each other's business, and the motels had that retro look that's either quaint or creepy, depending on the time of day. For us, arriving at dusk, it was edging more towards creepy. We checked into a motel that looked like it hadn't changed much since the 60s, except for the flat-screen TV awkwardly mounted on one wall. The woman at the front desk gave us a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and handed us the key to room 7. It was one of those physical keys attached to a bulky keychain, not a card you swipe. That should have been my first clue that this place was stuck in time in more ways than one. Jamie and I had been driving all day, so after we grabbed a bite to eat at a local diner, we were ready to crash. The room was exactly what you'd expect. 2 beds with floral bedspreads, a musty smell, and a bathroom that looked clean but felt like it was hiding secrets in its peeling wallpaper. We were too tired to care. We each claimed a bed, talked about our plans for the next day, and then fell asleep to the sound of an old air conditioner that was working way too hard for its age. It was in the middle of the night when I woke up feeling like something was off. The room was too cold, and the air conditioner had gone silent. I figured it had finally given up, but that's when I noticed the light. It was coming from under the door, but not the yellowish hue of the porch lights. This was a flickering blue light, erratic and unexplainable. I nudged Jamie awake, whispering that something weird was going on. We both stared at the door, the light casting shadows that danced across the room in a silent, eerie ballet. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the light vanished. We sat there in the dark, listening. That's when we heard it, a soft, unidentifiable sound, like whispers carried on a breeze, coming from just outside our door. It was too deliberate to be the wind, too inconsistent to be any machine. Jamie, ever the braver of us two, decided to check it out. I remember whispering for him not to go, but he just shushed me and crept to the door. He peered through the peephole and then turned to me, his face drained of color. He whispered that someone was standing outside our door, just standing there, staring at our door. No, not a person, but a creature shaped like a human, because its body was covered in scales. I didn't believe it, but I was incredibly curious. I tiptoed over and then peeked through the peephole. I got goosebumps all over. The humanoid creature walked away into the distance, and that's when I saw it had a tail. The blue light was emanating from the tip of its tail. We debated what to do for what felt like hours, but were likely only minutes. Calling the front desk seemed the logical choice, but when Jamie tried, the line was dead. Not a busy tone, not an out-of-service message, just silence. That's when panic really began to set in. Our cell phones had no signal, a common issue we'd encountered on back roads but never thought much of until now. The whispering stopped, and we sat in silence until the sun began to peek through the curtains. We hadn't slept, hadn't moved, and barely breathed. As dawn broke, we packed our things and decided to get out of there as quickly as possible. When we went to the front desk to check out, we were greeted by a girl dressed in hippie fashion, sporting a lip ring. She could tell we were a bit anxious and kindly asked if we had rested well last night. We didn't respond much. As we were leaving, my gaze accidentally fell on the girl's eyes, and I noticed something odd about her pupils. They were vertical. My first thought was that she might be wearing colored contacts. But considering the events of last night, I couldn't help but shiver at the thought. It wasn't until we got into the car that I finally took a deep breath and relaxed. Later on, every time Jamie and I recalled that experience, We couldn't help but feel a bit of regret for not having followed up on our curiosity that night. The hearts of young people are always filled with curiosity. 29-year-old male standing before a retro motel at dusk, capturing the quaint yet slightly eerie ambience of rural Pennsylvania. The setting sun casts long shadows, highlighting the motel's vintage sign against the fading light. Digital photography with low-light techniques for a natural look. AR-16:9, V6.0, style raw. Interior of Motel Room 7, featuring floral bedspreads and a musty atmosphere, as seen through the eyes of a 29-year-old man. The room's dated decor, including a bulky keychain on the nightstand and an old air conditioner, evokes a sense of time standing still. Digital photography, low-light techniques for realism. AR-16:9, V6.0, style raw. Close-up of a motel room door as observed by a 29-year-old male, under which a mysterious flickering blue light seeps through, casting eerie shadows across the musty interior. The scene captures a moment of silent tension. Digital photography focused on low-light and natural-looking techniques. AR-16:9, V6.0, style raw. Peering through the peephole, a 29-year-old male observes a humanoid creature with scales and a tail illuminated by a blue light from its tail, standing silently outside room 7 of a roadside motel. The scene combines fear with curiosity. Digital photography approach, utilizing low-light techniques. AR-16:9, V6.0, style raw. A 29-year-old man attempts to use a vintage motel phone only to find it dead, underlining the isolation felt in a rural Pennsylvania motel. The room is dimly lit, emphasizing the lack of connection to the outside world. Digital photography style with a focus on natural, low-light ambience. AR-16:9, V6.0, style raw. First light breaking into the motel room where a 29-year-old male and his friend spend a night filled with mysterious encounters, showing their exhausted but vigilant faces as they prepare to leave. Digital photography capturing the room in the soft light of dawn. AR-16:9, V6.0, style raw. A 29-year-old man noticing the unusual vertical pupils of a hippie-styled motel receptionist under the natural morning light, adding an unsettling twist to their departure. Focus on digital photography techniques that highlight the natural and low-light elements. AR-16:9, V6.0, style raw. A 29-year-old man and his friend hastily leaving a retro Pennsylvania motel at dawn, the eerie building receding into the background as they drive away. The scene captures a sense of relief mixed with lingering curiosity. Digital photography, emphasizing low-light and natural aspects. AR-16:9, V6.0, style raw. In the safety of their car, a 29-year-old male and his friend reflect on their unnerving experience, the rearview mirror showing the road stretching behind them. The focus is on capturing the mood through digital photography with natural, low-light techniques. AR-16:9, V6.0, style raw. A final look back at the retro motel sign through the car's rear window, as seen by a 29-year-old man leaving the scene. The sign, a symbol of their eerie adventure, fades into the distance. Digital photography style, utilizing low light to create a natural look. AR-16:9, V6.0, style raw. It was the summer of 2017, and my friend Mark and I had just graduated from college. We were both headed off to different cities for our jobs, so we decided to have one last hurrah, a road trip across the Midwest. Our plan was loose at best, aiming to hit a few national parks, see some landmarks, and enjoy the open road. We'd been on the road for about a week when we pulled into a small town in Nebraska late one night. The place was practically a speck on the map, with a population that couldn't have topped 300. We found a motel at the edge of town, the kind that hadn't seen a renovation since the 70s, but it was cheap and we were beat. The neon sign buzzed in a comforting, almost hypnotic rhythm as we checked in. The motel owner was an older guy, probably in his late 60s, with a weathered face and hands that had clearly seen hard work. He gave us a friendly enough welcome, but there was something in his eyes, a kind of guardedness, that I couldn't quite place at the time. He handed us our keys and mentioned offhand that we were the only guests that night. It should have been a relief, the promise of a quiet night's sleep, but instead, it set off a faint alarm bell in the back of my mind. Our room was basic. 2 beds, a TV that offered a fuzzy rendition of 3 channels, and a bathroom that looked like it could walk away on its spindly, rusted legs. We dropped our bags, decided to grab a late dinner at the only diner we'd seen on the way into town, and then call it a night. The diner was almost empty, save for a couple of locals who eyed us with that mix of curiosity and suspicion small towns reserve for outsiders. The waitress, a young woman probably in her early 20s, was friendly, recommending the special with a smile that reached her eyes. We chatted with her briefly, learning her name was Ellie. Back at the motel, Mark crashed almost immediately, but I found myself restless, flipping through the limited channels before giving up and deciding to take a walk. The night was quiet, the kind of quiet you only get far away from cities, where the silence is so thick it almost feels like a presence. I remember looking up at the sky, the stars unobscured by city lights, and feeling a sense of peace. That peace shattered when I heard the scream. It was distant, muffled, but unmistakably a scream of terror. My first thought was Ellie. I don't know why. Maybe it was because she was one of the few people we'd interacted with, or maybe it was just a gut feeling. Without really thinking about it, I started running in the direction of the sound, my heart pounding in my ears. I found myself at the edge of a field, the scream now silent, replaced by a chilling, oppressive silence. I hesitated, my rational mind catching up with me. What was I doing here? This wasn't my town, these weren't my problems. But then, I thought of Ellie's smile, and I knew I couldn't turn back. I ventured into the field, guided only by the moonlight. That's when I saw it, a figure, dragging something heavy. I hid behind a tree, my breath caught in my throat, watching as the figure struggled with its burden. It was then I realized what it was dragging, a body. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything but stand there frozen, but fear had rooted me to the spot. The figure stopped, looking around as if sensing my presence. I held my breath, praying not to be seen. It was only when the figure resumed its grim task that I dared to move, backing away slowly until I felt it was safe to turn and flee. I made it back to the motel, my mind racing, unsure of what to do. Mark was still asleep, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding just outside our door. I locked the door and spent the night wide awake, watching the shadows for any sign of movement. By morning, I had convinced myself that it had been a trick of the light, a figment of my overactive imagination. But as we left the motel, the owner gave us a knowing look, a twisted smile playing on his lips as he wished us a safe journey. It was then I saw it, a stain on his shirt, dark and sinister in the light of day. The silence between Mark and me was palpable as we sped away from that town. It wasn't until we crossed into the next state that I finally broke down and told him everything I had seen and heard the previous night. Mark listened quietly, his face growing more and more serious with every word. When I finished, there was a long silence before he finally spoke. "We need to report this," he said firmly. "We can't just pretend it didn't happen." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and dread. I knew he was right, but part of me wished we could just keep driving and leave all of this behind us. We found a police station in the next major town and told our story. The officers listened, took notes, and promised they would look into it, but their non-committal responses didn't fill me with confidence. We left the station with a hollow feeling, unsure if we had done the right thing or if it would even make a difference. We decided to cut our road trip short and head home, both of us eager to put as much distance as possible between us and that town. The drive back was a blur of silent miles, each of us lost in our thoughts. It wasn't until we were a few hours from home that Mark's phone rang. He glanced at it, frowning, and then put it on speaker. "Hello." It was one of the officers we had spoken to. "We looked into your report," he said, his tone grave. "You were right to come to us. We found, well, it's a crime scene. We're still piecing everything together, but it looks like there's been some foul play involved. Can't say much more right now, but I wanted to thank you. You did the right thing." After we hung up, the car was silent for a long time. The relief of having been taken seriously was overshadowed by the grim reality of what we had stumbled upon. It wasn't until several weeks later that we learned the full extent of what had happened. The body was Ellie's, the friendly waitress from the diner. The motel owner had been arrested for her murder, along with a string of other crimes that had plagued the town for years. It turned out that Ellie had been trying to expose him, gathering evidence of his activities, which is why she had been targeted. Mark and I followed the case closely, a morbid need to see it through to the end. When the motel owner was finally convicted, it brought no sense of closure, only a deep, lingering sadness for Ellie and the life she would never get to live. Our road trip had started as a celebration, a final adventure before embarking on our adult lives. Instead, it had turned into a nightmare, a stark reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of small-town America. We had gone looking for freedom and found only horror. In the years that followed, Mark and I remained close, bonded by the experience. We rarely spoke of it, but it was always there, a shadow that followed us. I found myself avoiding small towns, always driving a little faster when passing through, as if trying to outrun the memories. The horror of that summer night changed us in ways we couldn't have anticipated. It taught us about the fragility of life and the presence of evil in the most unexpected places. But it also showed us the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it's easier to look away. We had faced the darkness and survived, but we would never be the same.